Decided not to. Okay, so today we're going to speak about building resilient financial systems. We thought we wanted to speak about systems, and to really just give like a picture of this, right? It's about building resilient financial systems for modern commerce. So what is a financial system defined as? It's a network of financial institutions, tools, payment methods that essentially allow for the exchange of funds or money movement. And we'll be speaking about constructing, managing, and evolving these through the lens of a CFO. So a warning, I think every other moderator did this as well, but I will go off script. There will be some questions that we did not discuss in the prep, but I think you guys will be more than well equipped to answer these. Okay, I think we can just get into some introductions. Maybe Octavius, we start with you. Introduce yourself. Greg, you can introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, awesome topic for the graveyard shift. Two accountants talking finance systems.
With the liveliest moderator in the world.
We'll try our best to keep it interactive and exciting and non-technical. Octavius look after finance for Takealot. Prior to that, worked at Mr. D Food, and just general big passion for payments. And enjoy the innovation that's taking place in the space. And taking up the challenges to do the back-end stuff. It's not always just the sexy stuff on the APIs and the user interfaces. Somebody needs to go and check that we finally got the money, and it's not just an API call. So that's my world currently.
Yeah, no, thanks. Greg, obviously CFO of Superbalist. I've been here for a year since the amicable divorce from...
Divorce,
yeah. But the NDA hasn't run out yet, so I'm going to avoid bringing anything up.
I was going to say sale.
No, I'll be... but yeah, so prior to that, I was running a software development company that specialized in financial services, so building payment systems, being involved in the industry. So hopefully I can answer your questions, but if it doesn't turn into a quiz. And then I just quickly want to address Myrna, who slandered us saying that I made her work the weekend. That's not at all true. That was, if you guys had been earlier, it would have been fine.
Myrna, maybe I'll give you an opportunity to retort a little later. Okay, so I think as South Africans, we really understand the meaning of resilience, right? Honestly, in South Africa, it's a survival skill. We've built businesses that can handle load shedding, cable theft, Springbok hangovers on a Monday, and also all of the public holidays that run over March and April. As commerce moves across channels from online checkouts to in-store payments, the pressure on financial systems to stay stable, secure, seamless has never been higher. So let's unpack this and the many stress tests or unplanned stress tests that the macro environment constantly throws at us in South Africa. So Greg, I want to come to you first. You joined Superbalist, as you mentioned, just a little over a year ago. This was post the divorce, as you put it. I was going to say sale. What did the financial system of Superbalist look like at that point in time? And what really defined the decisions that you needed to make with regards to payments and the customer journey?
Yeah, I think in terms of the customer-facing side of things, we had and have around 12 separate payment methods, which is the most of any e-commerce player in South Africa. And that's not boasting, that's me saying it's a very complex environment both for ourselves to try and maintain, as well as for our customers to navigate and figure out exactly what it is that they're trying to do. So a big part of the early days was just to try and rationalize what we have in place. I think we used 8 separate PSPs for those 12 things, and using an aggregator for a single method doesn't make sense. I mean, the whole point is to aggregate. So we maintained separate APIs, we had a lot of the operational overhead on our side. Financial operations was managed by us with a team of 1, which is obviously not great, and we've got billions of rands flowing the system and not enough eyes on it. So a big part of it was picking partners who are able to take on financial operations, make things secure and seamless, and actually aggregate methods. And just acknowledge the fact that we're not a payments company, so why are we trying to be a payments company? So ship that off to guys such as yourselves who are able to help us out with that, and slowly work our way out of contracts that we don't necessarily need to be a part of anymore.
I'm really interested and intrigued to touch on like those multiple providers, but from a reconciliation perspective. I'm going to park that one or put it in the parking lot, which is right next to me here, and we're going to come back to it. Maybe, Octavius, coming to you. Takealot obviously launched in 2011. You joined the business in 2018. What are some of the trends and drivers that you've observed that make you think about changing what your financial system looks like, or that's actually driven changes in that financial system?
I think we've got a joke in our team to say, listen, this is the least complex the business will ever be. This is the least amount of transactions you'll ever process. These are the least amount of payment methods that you'll ever have. These are the least amount of vendors, suppliers, employees that you'll ever pay. So if you start the problem with that mindset, your outlook is always different, because you'll always say, but I'm not worried because it will change. Change is inevitable. So your whole perception of how you drive the change in the team starts from that basis of. It is complex, but I think what Fred and Alex also alluded to, that's what we thrive about. That's how we employ our individuals that works with us. But it's complex. I think I agree definitely. We're no payment experts. We're just a retailer wanting to sell stuff. But unfortunately, sometimes you need to go and talk about regulation changes and changes in the environment. So we stay abreast of it, but it's part of change. So we're not really worried. You can't have a silver bullet and say, this is how I'm going to approach it. Just be agile and say, listen, it is going to change. And then you take it day by day.
That's so interesting, speaking about like the regulatory side of it. And my first off-script question. How have you thought about the evolution of your role as a CFO, right, in these like changing dynamics, where now you have to think about like the payments landscape, you have to think about regulation, you have to think about vendors, you have to think about what payroll looks like on a monthly basis. Like, what does that essentially span for you, and how has your role evolved, like thinking about this?
I think from a Takealot perspective, when I joined, the compliance team was about like one person, and it's now like 5 dedicated people on compliance across everything. So if you just can imagine, if your slogan up until last week was anything you can imagine, you get into a position that you need to go and regulate. And it's not just payment, it's HR, it's drivers, it's everything. So from my perspective, I think everybody in the business find their niche specifically. And I don't know a lot about regulating about gig workers and gig economy. I know that's going to change in the future. But I try and stay abreast through sessions like this on payments specifically. And I think just broadly on payments, the role, at least from a CFO, is to understand the balance. Not all payment methods are equal. If you go and start splitting it between a customer demographic, if you go and start splitting between a frequency, if you look at the AOV, if you look at the cost, there's a lot of different stories that you can go and tell about it. And I think what our role from a finance perspective at least is how do you balance that within the broader profitability component of the business, because cash is important, but it's not always the highest AOV. And buy now, pay laters are great, but they're expensive. And how do you go and balance all of that? So from that perspective, from a CFO, I do believe that we add a lot of value, and also just keep the checks and balances in the business from an overarching profitability basis.
Yeah. It's always funny, obviously being from like a sales background, we say as sales, we make the money. and you guys then manage and help grow it. Okay, so I think speaking a little bit about maybe the trends and drivers that you've seen, Greg, because I'm really keen to understand like what makes you think about changing your financial system, and what are you seeing like from the needs of customers specifically?
Yeah, I think that a lot of us like to think we're special or like unique and it's never happened before, but just over time, this has existed forever. It's moving from checks to the next thing. Still remember having those little like things with the 4 digits you then have to type in, and then we've got OTPs and then this and that. So I think change is not just inevitable, it's been happening forever, and people have coped with it along those times. And in terms of the extent to which these changes affect us, if anything, it's getting smaller and smaller. We've got various methods that can be handled over a single API call, whereas before it was you needed teams of people to be able to adjust to things. So as much as we feel that things are moving rapidly, it's for me about having systems that are fit for purpose. And to Octavius' point as well, it's around being future-proofed. And I feel like being future-proofed is easier than ever at this point in time if you take the time to invest in it. I think given where the economy's been and all the rest from a macroeconomic perspective, across not just our industry, but most industries, there's been a reluctance to invest in IT projects or this, that, and the other. And what we've taken a stance on is that we need to make sure that we are ahead of the game from a payments perspective, should things change. So if BNPL gets more regulated, as there's talk of, that kind of thing, are we in a place to be able to move quickly to a new method or to update ourselves to be able to continue to use that in a way that makes sense for our customers? Because again, going back to my earlier point, that many methods available to a customer, it's not customer centric. You think it's like, oh, you've got every choice in the world, but whether I pay EFT with this provider, that provider, or the other, is it actually of relevance to the person who's making that decision, or is it confusing them and then they're dropping off from the experience? And drop-off isn't just about us trying to make more money. Drop-off is about the customer wanted to make a purchase, and now they've been unable to. So how do we make sure they're able to make that purchase?
Yeah, 100% agree on that. And I think that like it guides us like quite nice into the next topic, which is around payment operations, right? And this is where we'll pull out Recon from the parking lot, and we can discuss Recon specifically. You mentioned, I think it was 12 or 14 different payment methods, and you weren't doing that through any sort of aggregator. Just give us a feel of what reconciliation looks like in that world, and like what reconciliation looks like in your business. Do you have someone, you mentioned a team of one, but do you have someone now that's responsible for reconciliation? Like what is the system that you operate around that?
Yes, I can't go into specifics, but the team isn't one that handles money in Superbalist, just to make everyone at ease. But effectively, from a reconciliation perspective, not only do we have multiple providers being 12 different methods, some of them they're all paid at a different cadence. We have cash on delivery via the Takealot network and their third-party delivery network, which then, again, is settled in a different way to BNPL, which might be settled in a different way to card. We've got bank accounts with almost every major bank in South Africa, and so there's got funds landing in different bank accounts, depending on if we have moved our flow from one mid to another, depending on whether a bank is down or we're worried about that. Then we've got credit card funds from the same place ending up in two different banks at the same time. So recons is a huge issue in our life, and we do have a team dedicated to doing that around the clock. It's not just a month-end process, it's a constant that you have to stay on top of. And initiatives such as the ones we're undertaking to move to more methods through a PSP obviously enables us to rely on the reconciliation processes that happen on the PSP side. So again, it's about moving overhead to where it actually should be and where there's the expertise and the time.
Now, practically, what does that look like though? So you receive like 12 to 14 different ways of reconciliation statements from your different providers. Someone in your team or the team has to go through all of those, standardize them in the format that you need it in, and then be able to reconcile it against what you have in your bank account.
Yeah, have you seen our process? No, it's effectively that. It's, I mean, in a nutshell, it's not about. From what I'll try to do is not say I need something in a specific format because that's how I like to see it. It's very much like what makes the most sense for you to do, and then is it understandable to me? And if that's good enough, then let's not waste time making it pretty and putting it in a deck and then making it a PDF and then sending it to me. It's just like do what you need to do to make it happen. And yeah, we try and segregate the methods and how those are allocated to the different guys because context switching between methods is just it takes up a lot of their time. So yeah, we've got 4 guys that look into that, and that's their life.
Awesome. I think it's like a super interesting topic for me and like for us largely as Stitch because we've seen through the conversations that we've had with enterprise customers, I mean, Octavius, and the conversation that we had when we were looking to partner, reconciliation, the way Markov files would be delivered, the communication between bank, PSP, it was something that was important for you as well, right? So could you give us a feel or a flavor for like what your considerations around Recon are and like maybe not to be specific, but like how the team is architected around that from like a process perspective?
Okay. Recon's very typical or very accounting principles. I try and justify it. I say if I go and ask the techie, was the transaction successful? He'll tell me yes because the API call says we received the transaction was successful. And if I go and ask my accountant, is the transaction successful? They'll go to the bank. And ultimately, what happened now over the period of years is how the banks settle you. Now, depending on how you negotiate and everything, it is either very slick or very difficult. Because as soon as are you settled gross or you settled net, when are you being settled? And when they settle you, they don't go and settle you for the 10,000 individual transactions. They go and settle you a one-liner. Now, in the bricks and mortar, there's companies and businesses build around this problem specifically, and they've solved it for bricks and mortar. That problem was only now recently being solved for specifically for online. So I think we've worked very well in solving it, but then you get chargebacks, and then there's a negative flow. But as soon as you get to a point where I need to go and reconcile my back end towards a bank statement, and on the bank statement there isn't individual lines, but there's a one-liner, that's when it gets difficult and complex. And then you can't really go and say, did I receive all the money at the point in time? So it's part of the process. I think companies like yourself is doing definitely very well. And specifically within your component that you are the acquiring business, it makes it much easier because then you see the full flow. So I think that's definitely, there's a big need stake for that, specifically for enterprises. I think the small moms and pops that does e-commerce online, they go and open up their bank statement and say, oh yeah, there's a round figure. Oh yeah, it feels more or less right or not. If you operate at a larger scale, you're pedantic. You know exactly at a point in time for yesterday, what wasn't it? And yeah, I phone the banker immediately and say, listen, it's now been 3 days. Why hasn't these been settled? So I think you need to keep everybody in the ecosystem on their toes. Otherwise, you'll just wake up and yeah, there's no money in the account.
Yeah, and I think something that you touched on there is important as well, is around like getting very pedantic. So I mean, I'm often in trouble for looking at like very, very small numbers, but I think the point is, if you pick up an error, how do you know it's systemic or not? And if it's systemic at this sort of scale, next thing you know, it's a massive issue. So it's really important to focus on the detail as far as possible, as far as it allows.
So there was an additional arm of being a CFO, which was also a banking relationship manager. You mentioned getting on the phone with the banker really quickly. One of the things you mentioned just around recon and settlement, Octavius, was gross or net settlement. Explain that a little bit more. Is that net the fee, that your acquiring fee or your processing fee?
So depending how good the salesperson is that's trying to sell you the solution and how their commission is structured, I think any business, it's not unreasonable to say, listen, do you want to get paid now or later? And I think everybody will say, I would like to get paid now. So it's not uncommon, specifically in the payment and where we are, to say, listen, but I'll go and first deduct the fees and then I'll go and pay you the net. But yeah, it's definitely not the norm at where we are, and ultimately it's a commercial decision and consideration that you need to take. From a recon perspective, it's not much easier just to get settled gross because then it's a one-to-one relationship. Then I don't need to go and figure out what was the interchange for that specific transaction and to go and figure out what your fee is and then try and get a random amount to my bank statement. Gross settlement, always the norm, same day and one-to-one ratio.
Got you. I mean, a question for both of you, but how do you think about like the role of automation within payment operations or the recon process?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a huge driver. I mean, finance can be extremely capital head intensive. We've got a much bigger team than you might expect on our finance side of things, but when we break it down, and I'll try to talk around it as opposed to directly at it, but for a single supplier for a month, we could have in excess of 1,000 invoices for one supplier. And we've got many, many, many suppliers. And part of that's just the way in which these sorts of things operate. But from our perspective, we've never felt like we have the power to say to suppliers, like, this is the form that everything needs to take place in, so just straight through processing into our systems. There's been manual capture of those invoices. So you can imagine the tens of thousands of invoices, hundreds of thousands of invoices that come through. And it just doesn't make sense. It's one of those classic use cases for RP or robotic process automation, or even now moving into the future of agentic AI. So we're in the middle of a process to have an agentic AI agent for that processing, and not just from the capture and all the rest of it, but the actual feeding through into our accounting software, the diversion of exceptions to the right places. And that then allows the people to do what the people should be doing, which is maintaining supplier relations, not just spending 29 days of the month with your head down, headphones on, typing out numbers, but actually getting on the phone, getting ahead of things, and being more proactive. And then beyond that, I mean, you can't mark your own homework as well. So now when they're doing reconciliations, it's much more meaningful. They can actually interrogate it as opposed to just like days through it. So for us, it's a very exciting project, and yeah, we are looking to land it in the next month or so. So yeah, just as one example of what we're up to.
Awesome. And Octavius, for you guys, automation and the recon process?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're referring to the statement supplier component. Yeah, so basically, good practice to go and pay a supplier based on the statement that he gives you, and then depending on how you negotiate, it's either 30 or 60 or 90 days. But traditionally, it's a finance function that's very manual and tedious.
Yeah.
But you need to go and consume a supplier statement, go and match it three-way between your PO and your GRV. Retailers have been doing this for the last 20 years. What our approach is ultimately is how do you keep the same financial rigor? You just go and apply tech. And it is systematically reconciliations. Now, if you don't have the pocket to go and run a full end-to-end SAP integration that will cost you a couple of millions, maybe billions on an annual basis, you get forced to go and think, but how do I apply the same financial rigor, but just with latest technology? And definitely to your point, it's the machine learning and image recognition on the payment and a three-way matching. That tech wasn't there 3, maybe 5 years ago, and it's much cheaper now. So we're definitely applying it already on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's exciting and good to hear. I'm going to switch gears into the next topic, which is, I mean, you guys are both natively e-commerce businesses, right? But we know that 90% of payments still happen in person. And I mean, we had panels earlier around the omnichannel experience. There's touches of this in both businesses, right? Like cash on delivery service. But how do you, and question for both of you, so we'll come to both of you on it, but how do you guys think about the omni-channel experience, like one in its existing form, and maybe the future of this in your businesses? Octavius, we can come to you first.
Yeah, I think maybe on our pickup points, there's a use case specific. I've been in multiple discussions, even at the Mr. D Food Days, but why don't you just go and accept your when the pizza gets delivered, why can't I just go and tap my card? From a customer perspective, the least friction that I can give you and the best customer experience that I can give you is by your card being tokenized on the platform. And I can give you a frictionless transaction. It can be much more secure. There's no this interaction with the driver that, oh, I'll just wait another 10 minutes, I need to go and get my purse, to go and get my card. So fundamentally, we've always been to say, what is the best experience we can give to a customer? I think a world will definitely be there in the future, specifically maybe at our pickup points, or if we go and do a JV with a specific partner within that has a physical premise, we'll go and double into that. But for a e-commerce player, we want to go and solve what's the least amount of touch points, because payment shouldn't be a friction. And even me taking out my card and tapping it on a device, we see as friction as opposed to just, there's the icon, just press it. So I think that's maybe why we haven't delved into it. I know the tech has evolved a lot. We have done a couple of pilots to go and accept card at point of delivery, but it comes with its own challenges as well. As soon as you see your success rate on the delivery, if a customer hasn't already paid, the incentive for them to actually take over the parcel is also not there. So I think for now, it's online specific. I think the world's going to change a lot because it's just going to be payments. Doesn't matter if it's online or offline.
But Greg, just before that, I think to respond to that as well, it's good business practice to accept funds, especially for an e-commerce business, before you actually deliver the parcel. Because I imagine with cash on delivery, like you just said, with the success of the delivery, there's an underlying cost of that, right? And if you have 20 unsuccessful deliveries, I mean that starts to. I mean, I don't know how meaningful that is, but like at scale, that starts to look quite bad, right?
For CID, I think it's a very unique proposition that we have countrywide. We're the only player that accepts COD, and we've been accepting it since the inception. So it is valuable. It still drives a specific need within the business. Yeah. The cost is more, the risk is more, but ultimately you need to go and meet the customer where the customer need is. Yes, we've got the rules in place to say that it doesn't get abused, but for now it's there. And if I go and see what the non-3D secure card not present interchange rates is, cash is still cheap. So the construct that it's expensive, I don't buy that.
And we're fortunate enough to piggyback on what you guys have in place. So, yeah, agreed. It's something that's not going anywhere anytime soon.
And maybe, Greg, just like a general take on omnichannel and like what your thoughts are on omnichannel and like an omnichannel experience for like Superbalist. Give us your perspective on it.
Yeah, I suppose the fashion world or the apparel and footwear specifically, it's your clothes have to fit you as a start. So when it comes to an online-only player, we fully acknowledge the fact that your home is your fitting room. So part of that understanding is free returns. We want to make it as simple for you as possible to want to try something on, and we might say stuff about you and you're behind your back if we see that you specifically are returning all the time. But generally speaking, we fully anticipate and cater for that in our pricing and the way in which we operate, because that's our touch point with the customer. And I think that, again, we share in the pickup points and all the rest of it. But for us, when we think about omnichannel and from an online space to a physical space, it's obviously a conversation that's been had over and over again. And it's about making sure that the country is ready for something along those lines if we were to go down that route, and making sure that we're ready for that. I think that since we stepped in a year ago and have started running this, there's a number of different points to concentrate on. And so we're systematically going through everything, whether it be consolidation of payment methods to actually just making sure we don't have 10-year-old dresses sitting in the back of the warehouse we didn't know about. So get the basics right, and then from there everything else will follow. But the big thing for us is sort of from a sizing perspective, we've got a virtual version of being able to try it on. So once you have certain items that you haven't delivered, then we've got something called Fit Finder that, based on exactly what it is, it tells you what your fit is for that specific item. So initiatives like that sort of bring that real world understanding to the digital world.
I felt your engineer John Mark's presence when you said the virtual room. And when you said the fitting room, your best fitting room is your room, I actually looked out for him because he may have had a comment on that. Okay, for both of you as well, we're thinking about this topic or concept of like innovation and being innovative. And I mean, you get the two sides, which is like an early adopter and a fast follower. Maybe give us an overview of like how you think about like innovation in the payment space from a new method perspective, where you're happy to be an early adopter or what your considerations are, and where you would like to be a fast follower.
So, I mean, given the journey we're on with looking to consolidate, it hasn't necessarily been a focus over this time period. But what we have noticed is that as demand rears its head, we can move relatively quickly. I mean, we did our Apple Pay integration, I mean, in the space of 3 weeks kind of thing. Is it perfect? No. Do people have what they want? Yes. So it's about balancing that time to market with an understanding of demand. I mean, our engineers have a backlog of however long of stuff we know that we need. And until something can prove its business case that it is needed, there's plenty else to do. So it's never about necessarily being on the bleeding edge. It's more about knowing that it's there and then being able to react quickly to that so that you don't fall behind.
And from your perspective, Octavius?
There's always this long tail list of everything else that you want to go and integrate onto. I think maybe I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I always say that there's a finite amount of money that an individual has, and that money is either in his bank account or in some form of alternative wallet or some alternative loyalty points. And that's the money that they have to go and spend on. I don't think that there's a pot of money that we haven't tapped in, maybe only crypto, from my view, where there hasn't been. But the money that's either it's in your bank account or you're going to use it on a buy now, pay later, that's the money that you have. So I think we've covered most of the bases. I think how we traditionally approach it is say, what's the biggest upside? In the past, it was to say, can we acquire customers through this? We are fortunate in the sense that the payment methods or the alternative payment methods comes to us and say, but they want to go and drive the adoption of their payment method through us, actually either acquiring our customers. So that the times have changed a bit. But you go and build a business case around it, and then you say, listen, is there an upside? And then you go and ask the questions, but how big is the pot of money that you've got to offer? Or i.e. this money that can be spent? What's the AOV? What's the frequency? What's the demographic of the customer? And then you make a business decision around it. I think I always call it the smarty box. The smarty box there is full. There's not a lot of other payment methods. I think it's going to be, crypto is the only one that might still be there, but it's a ROI calculation that you do, and as a general merchant, you don't have a lot of margin to play with. So as soon as a transaction fee of 4 or 5, then it's not even a discussion. So
I must give kudos to yourself and Rehan. I think when we had the discussion around digital wallets and Apple Pay, at the time, you guys were asking us questions around what does adoption of this look like in South Africa. And there was very low enterprise adoption. I think we had suffered a cold start problem.
You told us a lot. You told me, no, you need to go and do it. So the sales pitch was really convincing.
I'm glad to. Thank you for the feedback. I think you guys were willing, because of what you saw from a demand perspective, you saw the value of implementing a method like this, given what your user demographics look like as well. So I think kudos to you guys there. Okay, I've got 2 more questions, and then we will move on to some Q&A from the audience. But I think I'd be remiss not to discuss competitiveness and market dynamics, right? Both of you being native e-commerce players, over the past 3 years, we've seen e-commerce businesses, global competitors in both your spaces move into market. Tell me, how do you process this as from a business perspective, and generally, what are your thoughts around competition?
Yeah, I think Octavius is laughing because we've answered this question every time we've spoken to anyone. It's very popular and for a good reason as well. It's the entrance of international players has been significant. It's been fast and it's been broad. I think there was a while where I couldn't open Instagram without an advert being from a certain international company. So it did hit the country quite quickly, but I think that there's a number of positive spins that have come out of that. From our perspective, it forced a change in strategy. So you would have seen previously our strapline under Superbalist was more fashion, more choice, and that's very much the play of low-cost international competitors who own that space, and there's no competing in that space. Whereas we've now moved to sort of a strapline of Live Superb, which is that idea of aspirational, catering to different LSM and having a curated collection of goods that you basically don't have to think when you're buying from us, because you know you're going to get something great, whether it be at good price point or just good quality all around. So it's definitely been a shift in what we do. It's not about price, it's not about the rest, it's about curation. And also what we noticed is initially there was a massive uptake of those international competitors, and then that sort of tapered down over time. But what didn't taper down was customer trust in the ability to purchase online. E-com penetration in South Africa is very, very low when you compare us to other developing nations. We sit at around 9%, depending on whose data you look at, and don't get me started on market data in the media, because it's not always there. But effectively, we foresee that at some point, the level of e-com in the country necessarily needs to pick up. As flat as retail has been over the last number of years, our share of that retail has grown, and it's one of those rising tide, all ships kind of thing, where we have found that because people have that trust in e-com from the likes of those guys that came in, we've noticed that they've transitioned across to using the likes of us, and I'm sure the likes of Takealot as well.
Yeah, and what has your experience been of this, Octavius?
Yeah, competition, it forces you to go and just look in the mirror and say, listen, is this the best I can be? And I think it forces you to go and say, but where's your strength? Where's your weakness? And then you go and change your strategy around that. I think definitely agree on the adoption, because ultimately it's very expensive to go and acquire a customer and to go and let them do their first transaction online. If there's more people beating that drum, and the grocery guys did a wonderful job in that. So you start now, all of a sudden I can get my milk and bread, or I can use to get that. If I'm comfortable to go and get a T-shirt from a Chinese seller all the way from the other side, then, well, that's the biggest risk that you ever had, because you don't know about the size, you don't know when you're going to get it, you don't know anything about the payment. So if a customer is willing to go and adapt that, then surely it should be a lot easier to go and do other adoption on e-commerce. So I think it's definitely helped in driving the market. But it also forces us also to say, listen, but where are we and what do we stand for? And I think what Fred also mentioned this morning is to say, but we're a South African company and we're for South Africa. We're not a capitalist. Yes, we're capitalists, but we're not just here to go and come in, take all the money and then leave nothing behind. It's a much bigger social play as well where we're at. And I think ultimately that's where we're going to focus on, and it's not just about market share, it's about the impact that you leave behind.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, final question is just around some of the macroeconomic forces. I think we live in a very, very crazy and chaotic time. If we think about like black swan events like COVID, if we think about like load shedding in South Africa, recently there was like all the talk of tariffs from the US. You guys obviously have, as Takealot, Octavius, you have sellers on the platform and in the marketplace that would be importing goods from other markets. How do these forces affect the work that you do as Takealot?
Yeah, I think you need to focus on the stuff that's in your control. If you're not going to be able to go and sway the macroeconomic conditions just by a flick of a button. So you go and focus on, so listen, but this is in my control, so I'll be the best at that. And if the economy isn't growing, and if the retail market for the last 5 years been standing still, then you can be a player at it, but you won't be able to go and change it. There's other forces that need to go and change it. So we don't dwell too much on it. I think the pie is the pie, and make sure that you get a bigger slice of the pie. But it also, you need to go and align the team as well, because if everybody's going to walk around negative and say, oh, but this country isn't growing, there's no growth as well, then it's just not going to be a like a place to work with. So I think how I at least approach it and say, listen, but there's still massive opportunities, and I always say this in hindsight, just go and see where we started, where we are now. But yeah, I think black swan events like COVID, hopefully not again in this lifetime, but a strike is a real thing. If there's a COSATU strike, earlier this week was very low-key, but as soon as a KZN happens again or something, then this is South Africa. This is the market that we work in. So you need to be able to go and adapt to it and just be ready, because it's not if, it is when it comes. How are you going to adapt to it?
I mean, Fred mentioned that you had some war stories a little bit earlier. I can imagine that period in 2021 with the riots that happened in KZN was a challenging time for you guys, given location of DC and the rest.
Yeah, I think that was maybe one. The other war story was at Mr. D Food during COVID. So when the legislation changed and say, but you're not, because Takealot wasn't allowed to trade. They said you're not allowed to go and buy your flip-flops online, but you're allowed to go and buy your KFC online. And the KFCs weren't able to go and trade. Not even the drive-thru was open, so it was only available for online. And obviously we didn't know that the legislation was coming. And then they just switched it on overnight, and it was a mess. So payments failing, banks falling over. Those days we weren't that sophisticated on throttling a driver. So yeah, it's weekends working day and night trying to go and untangle the spaghetti on the recon. It builds character if it doesn't do anything else at the end.
Optimistic view on it. Greg, quickly, some of your thoughts on the macroeconomic environment?
Yeah, I think, Octavius, you touched on a lot of the points that I was going to raise as well, but it's very much around the fact that the reason that these events are memorable is that they were one-offs. It's not something that you can necessarily see happening again. But after COVID, now every company has a plan for dealing with COVID, which we just sits in a drawer somewhere because it's not happening again. I still remember the water restrictions that we had back in the day, and I was on like the water restriction committee where we had to plan like toilets and stuff. You're like, what are we doing here? Like, this is just so I think what's most important for companies is to look at it from sort of like one level of abstraction higher of you need to have a plan to come up with a plan. So when something happens in our business, we know what we need to do to come up with a solution to that event. It's not about having a predefined plan for that. It's about saying, what do we need to have in place? Who are the key stakeholders? How do we make sure we include everyone in this decision? And then also, I like that optimistic comment of like, how do we look at what this actually means? I think as companies that operate to an extent on a global perspective, getting imports, all the rest of it, when the tariffs happened in the US, one of the first things I did was the next supplier meeting I had, I said to them, what are you unable to send to the US that you can send to us that we've never had before? So there's opportunity within all of this, and it's just about staying open-minded to that and not sitting with your head down being like, oh no, here we go again, there's load shedding happening. It's more like, how many generators can we sell? I don't know where you're on that side, but yeah, I suppose that's me.
I guess being resilient is like part of the South African DNA, right? Okay, we are done. Thank you very much, guys. I think we have probably time for 1 to 2 questions from the audience, and then we will wrap the panel up. So we'll open the floor quickly.
No questions about recons.
I think I asked them all already.
Yeah, I was wondering why we were here, same as you, but I think it's so that the innovation talk seems even greater after finance, just like more exciting.
Okay, question from Deerveld. I'll bring you a mic.
Thanks, Octavius. Thanks, Greg. That was awesome. I've got a question around how you see your specific areas in the business evolving. The financial engine of any business is obviously very complicated, and it touches so many different areas. And over time, we've seen that engine and its responsibility of where it should focus also like shift. There's the core. But keen to hear, how do you see the modern finance team change and evolve, and where will be the areas of expertise in a business like yours where we're going to have tech that's going to improve a lot of the things that we do on the daily, and that'll free up more and more time to focus on the nitty-gritty things that often one doesn't get to. And keen to just hear how you're seeing that, and how do you see that evolve for your teams as technology grow, and obviously as you and your teams become more sophisticated.
Yeah, I think the finance team definitely changed a lot since over the couple of years. Specific aspects like finance operations, which Bonnie heads up, that's also changed significantly over the years. In the past, fraud was easy to detect. It's now complex, and it's syndicates. It's not just, somebody got a granny to go and give her OTP and then all of a sudden they buy something. It's sophisticated stuff, and I think that's where we need to evolve and continue evolving. But then the rest is traditional finance. I think you've got your FP&A component, you've got your reporting component, you've got your accounting component, but everything just needs to be tech-enabled. And I think what we're fortunate of is that our data structure is really good. Even though from a finance perspective, it's not fully integrated, but the underlying data that we work from is very is very rich. And I think that enables us to go, and even if it's from a reporting perspective, all the way to a fraud, to an FP&A cost allocation, I think that allows us to be enabling tech and enabling technology to go and do it much better, as opposed to having this fully integrated rudimentary ERP system that isn't just by a click of a button go and say, what's the profitability of this driver on that day over this period? And I think that's ultimately where I see the finance is more enabling and giving those insights, specifically from an FP&A perspective, to keep the business also accountable to say, listen, but is this decision really the right one to be made from a finance perspective?
Yeah, I think similarly to that as well. One of the sort of like mantras I have in our team is that it's not an accounting team, it's a finance team. And I think it's quite a subtle differentiation, but accounting is very retrospective, very how did we do last month? It's like, this is how we did. It's very like in finance, it's more about how can I actually add value to the business. It's anyone who works, which would be most of the guys here, in a cost center, it's a horrible place to be. It's the first point of call when there's a bit of a loss or something like that is let's go to the cost center and reduce it. But as soon as you sort of reframe that in your team as we're actually adding value to the business, it's not about reducing costs, it's about how do we actually bring more value, how do we make people make the right decisions. I've joked about in our management accounts one day I'm going to actually just put random stuff towards the back of it and see who actually contacts me, because then I know you're actually reading the stuff. And if they're not, then that's not on them, that's on me. That's what's in there is not decision useful. So one of the blessings of being outside of the Takealot group as well is that, respectfully, but obviously there's a huge group above and above and above. So like the roll-up sheets, the stuff that's necessary to be part of that group is no longer necessary for us. So doing things that are fit for purpose, doing things that are decision useful, and engaging with business more meaningfully and not just spurting out numbers on a monthly basis as quickly as you can and thinking that you're adding value. It's about, no, how do I actually proactively get involved? How do I make sure that we drive the business forward using our expertise as members of the finance team?
Awesome. Okay, we'll wrap up there. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.